Britain's Defence Ministry has confirmed to us that its jets took part in deadly coalition airstrikes in Syria's Deir ez-Zor province on Saturday. Our correspondent Polly Boyker's got the detail.
Well, they said that we're fully cooperating with the coalition investigation, and they added that the UK would not intentionally target Syrian military units. So not too much information there, but according to news reports here in Britain, it was a UK Reaper drone that was involved. But this mistaken airstrike has caused a lot of damage, and not just in terms of the number of people that died, which was, by the way, 62 Syrian soldiers. Diplomatically, we're seeing quite a big row break out over this. This was an operation that went very wrong. It was launched in an area where the Syrian army was surrounded by ISIL militants, and as soon as it happened, the Russian military contacted the US, explaining that they'd hit the wrong target. But still, in the chaos that ensued, ISIL were able to gain some ground as a result of what happened. The Syrian government is so upset about this that it's accused the US-led coalition of basically helping Islamic State in Syria. It's fair to say that the Russian side is pretty exasperated as well. Moscow's been saying for a long time that they would like the US-led coalition to coordinate its military efforts in Syria with the Russians, precisely in order to avoid situations like these, which is why Russia has called for an emergency session of the United Nations Security Council. And that's where this row has escalated, because the US is dismissing Russia's calls for that UNSC meeting as some sort of a stunt. They're kind of inferring that Moscow is milking this situation, or sort of reveling in the fact that the US made such a major blunder. Washington's trying to play down the incident. The US has offered condolences and has insisted that it was a mistake, one that they will try to learn from. But what is now becoming clear is that this was a mistake that a number of the coalition countries were involved in. We've had that admission from the British. Earlier, we heard the Australian president confirming that his country's jets took part in the strike, and the Danish have said that their aircrafts were involved as well. So it's making that ceasefire in Syria look pretty tenuous right now.
Yeah, Polly Boyker, they were following the airstrikes in Syria, which came during the US-Russia brokered ceasefire ongoing in the country just about. Washington's started to try and shift the blame somewhat after US officials questioned the credibility of their partners in the peace talks.
We have to get the facts of exactly what's happened, who struck whom and how today. I think what's critical is the Russians need to be more serious about getting the Assad regime to adhere to the terms of the ceasefire, which began last Monday.
We've been talking for months, if not years, about how Russian credibility is on the line.
And they're calling this emergency meeting? Really? Now, because of a single airstrike.
Based on our collective experience here in observing the situation inside of Syria over the last year or two, I think we'd have some reasons to be skeptical.
If we determine that we did indeed strike Syrian military personnel, that was not our intention. And we, of course, regret the loss of life.
Well, let's try and get the backstory here, get the view live from Damascus there. Michael Raddy, co-editor of BS News. Hi, Michael. Thanks for being with us. You've heard the various sides saying what they think has happened here. There are various nations involved in the Syrian airstrikes. How difficult is it really going to be to get down to the pinpoint of who is responsible for this?
I suspect it'll be actually impossible to get to the truth, since the coalition is doing its own investigation on what they're calling a blunder or a mistake or an accident. The US has got enough air power and surveillance equipment to actually do this strike on its own. If that's what it was intending, to strike ISIS, it could have done it on its own. Instead, it involved at least 3 other countries' military, including Danish, the Australian, and the British obviously were there for their Reaper drones doing the surveillance. That to me says that they did that deliberately. They involved the coalition to create plausible deniability, to make it look like it was easy to bungle an effort, that there was communication problems between the at least four countries involved. But we know that the Syrian Arab Army in the location, they've been there for 2 years. They haven't moved their position. And this is the third time that the coalition has struck the Syrian Arab Army. This one is particularly egregious because of the severe loss of life. I think the numbers are up to 83 now and over 100 injured. So this was a devastating attack, and I honestly believe that this was deliberate. This was not a bungled attempt to hit an ISIS target.
You aren't the first to have said that today. I've had many guests on that have said more or less the same thing. But what's the end game? What was the aim of it, if that is the case?
I think that the Americans had to do some face saving. We saw that they were sort of chased out of towns effectively in northern Syria in the last few days with their so-called rebels, their proxy armies, calling them imperialist and crusading pigs. I think that the US was making a statement to its proxy armies to say, we are on your side, we are against the government of Syria, and we are there for you. We are your unofficial air force. That was the point that was being made. It's interesting that there was a social media activity by Ken Roth from Human Rights Watch, and he said that the attack and the loss of life, the killing of soldiers, was due to the intransigence of Bashar al-Assad. Now, that strikes me as meaning that he thought originally that this was a deliberate attack.
Mike.
Once the US began saying this was an accident, Ken Roth deleted his tweet.
Mike, as you're talking to us, there's a line actually that's just come in. I want to get another handle on it. I want to get another source. But we're hearing from our team producers here, the Syrian military has now declared the 7-day ceasefire period over, and doesn't go on to say whether or not it'll be renewed. That's certainly bad news, considering all the build-up that went up to this, up to weekend before last, trying to broker this ceasefire to get in some aid, especially to Aleppo. But looks like, but we want to get more meat on this. The line just coming in now to break to our viewers that it looks like this 7-day ceasefire is over. Boy, that's bad news. Your initial reaction to that, if it is true, as it appears to be?
My initial reaction is why wasn't the provisions of the ceasefire actually published? This was all being vetoed by the US. This could have been published a week ago. There was something in that document that the Russians wanted everyone in the world to know that the US kept blocking. I don't know what it was, but it was obviously something to do with, or it was going to highlight the fact that some of the groups are obviously supported by the US and the coalition and the Western countries. Whatever that was, we may never know now. I think that the Russian government, Lavrov and Putin, should just publish the document as it stands. Obviously, they're very crude chess players in terms of international diplomacy. That may not happen, but it would be interesting to find out what was the stumbling block for that document, the ceasefire provisions, that it was never published in the first place.